these people. And these viewers that take it or leave it, they know that you are going through a cost-cutting exercise. If it doesn't work, then that's it. It doesn't work. We're not going to do it. And so that's the stance that that we took. Yeah.
Mr. Corner.
Yes, ma'am.
This point about being treated equally, that isn't the motivation given for this approval, is it?
I'm talking about my engagement.
Yes, but your answer was that this motivation gave you the reason to commit a further 2.4 million rand for TNA newspapers over the year. I picked that up at the bottom of page 13.
Yeah.
So I'm just indicating what in that section on motivation told you that what was motivating the BAC was that TNA wanted to be treated equally to other newspapers.
Okay, remember, advocate, they came to me, and said to me, we are not happy with how we are being treated. We have not even concluded the agreement that we had with SAA. So whilst they started giving papers in 2011, the agreement was not signed. So I said to Nazim, go back and talk to the supply chain guys, so that you make sure that they are happy. And I told the supply chain guys, I said, guys, we have not, these people are busy paying for the newspapers. We do not have a signed agreement at the moment. Just engage these people and see whether there's a need. If there's no need, then you tell them, and then we sign an agreement of what is there.
Where did the BAC submission tell you that there was a need?
Sorry?
Where did the BAC submission tell you there was a need?
That's what I said. That's what I say to them. I said, if there is a need, you take it. If there is no need, then you don't take it.
So did you assume that there was a need?
No, I didn't. That's why I say I never say to them. I say this is what these people are saying. If there is a need, you take it. If there is no need, then you don't take it.
Mr. Corner, you're going to need to help if you don't mind. You, as I understand your evidence, have an interaction with Mr. Hauer in which he says to you he's dissatisfied about the fact that he's not being treated the same as other newspapers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you make any inquiries at the time about the terms on which TNA was being treated relative to other media houses?
There was no agreement that was signed.
That's not the question, Mr. Corner. Did you make any inquiries at the time about how TNA was being treated relative to the other media houses?
Yes, I did.
And what did that establish?
That they did not have a signed agreement, and also there were new newspaper coming onto the market.
Had they been paid previously for the subscriptions pursuant to the February 2012 BAC decision?
I would assume so, because they were supplying newspapers.
See, because what TNA was told in February 2011, when that agreement was concluded for 2 months, was that it was being treated the same way as the other newspapers. Do you recall reading that?
I was not aware. That's the letter that I said I was not aware when I got these documents.
But you received other information that suggested to you that they weren't being treated the same and they wanted greater circulation. Is that right?
No, the only information that I only had engagement with Nazim Hauer, and he's the one then who passed on this information to me. Then I went to the bidder adjudication committee and said, have you guys, because that's when he told me that his contract has not been signed too. Then my conversation with the BAC guys was that, guys, can we make sure that this process is completed so that then we finalize this issue at the moment? And then that's when then they engaged and came up with this.
Mr. Corner, this submission is not to regularize the existing arrangement. It's a motivation to increase over a period of 12 months the daily copies from 3,000 a day to 7,000 a day.
Advocate, you're not getting me correctly. I'm saying that with respect, I'm saying they were already supplying papers, but they did not have a signed agreement with the airline. And I accept that it was in addition. So they already had a tender that they were supplying. But this was in addition to what they were supplying. So that addition for me, I said, if we can afford it and it works, then you can and they come and say, it can be done, sure, you can go ahead and do it. But if it can't be done, then it can't be done.
How did you establish that SAA could afford it?
It's not me that does this, the establishment. Yeah.
Well, where does it say here in this motivation that SAA can afford it?
Sorry?
Where does it say in the motivation that SAA
No,
can afford it?
in my communication with the team, they told me that we could afford it.
Did you take note of what the General Manager of Operations wrote on this submission before it came to you for approval?
Who is that?
Mr. Ramasia at page 15. Could you read into the record what is written there in handwriting next to Mr. Ramasia's name?
There is currently no budget on operations for this.
So how, despite that, did you content yourself that there was a budget available for this?
We're not charging extra. That was my conversation to the people.
But Mr. Corner, I think you and you indicated earlier that we might be at cross purposes. I don't think we're at cross purposes. This was a motivation to go from the current 3,000 daily copies of TNA newspaper that SAA was paying for and increase that to more than double, to 7,000 daily newspapers. And that was going to cost a company which your previous evidence described as a company busy losing money. It was going to cost the airline another 2,402,400 rand. Before you approved this, what did you do to content yourself that that money was available for 4,000 more copies of the TNA newspaper?
Okay. Let me just explain to you, advocate, what happens. If, as you are sorting out the network, you increase the flights. When you increase the flights, there's a budgetary issue that is affected as well. There's an increase in budget. But now, as I told you earlier on, that as I was busy working, everything that I was trying to put in place, I had the proverbial carpet being pulled under my feet when I was trying to work. So I do not see this. I would not have seen this as a problem to me per se. It would have not been a problem to me per se, because once you redo the network, then and you increase the network, then the budgets are all redone and they become available. The issue was that my communication to the people was that, can we afford to do this? And if we can afford to do this, then let's do it.
And what did you make of no budget being available for it?
Sorry?
What did you make of the comment that there was no budget available for it?
You know, with respect, advocate, for me, it becomes an issue of my own personal judgment. Yeah.
And Mr. Corner, just help me at page 15.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hofmeyer. You must just tell me if the question I want to put is connected with the question you want to put. I'm not sure that I followed your explanation of how you would have approved that the number of copies of this newspaper be increased in the manner that was proposed in circumstances where the GM operations made a note that there was no budget for operations. I'm not sure that I followed it. I would like you to just give it again.
Okay, Chair. The business is being reorganized. So when a business is being reorganized, everything changes. So if I know that I'm going to cut costs, where I'm going to cut costs operationally, and I am dealing with a 30 billion rand organization, And I know that I'm going to cut so much cost with my interventions that I'm putting in place, and I'm going to increase the networks that I'm going to do. Then, when I come and say that I'm using my better judgment, it becomes an issue of saying, I know that we're going to have a surplus of cash once we implement these initiatives that we are going to implement, and that is then going to free up a lot of free cash flow within the organization. And that's when I come and say that in my own better judgment. But I knew that there was money with the initiatives that we're putting in place.
Would this issue have fallen under operations, under, is it Miss or Mr. Zook's?
It's Miss.
Miss.
Yes.
Did it fall under her budget, this issue of the newspaper?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is your answer, therefore, that you approved this even though she said there was no budget for it in her department where this belonged?
Yes.
You approved it because you knew
all the
that
initiatives,
you would get money from somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair. Do you think it was relevant to know what the readership of TNA was like at the time that you committed that other budget to 2.4 million spend with them?
You see, Advocate, we looked at what was going on, and when we're saying what was going on, we looked at what the other papers were being taken at, and that's the explanation that my people are saying, that once they get the latest figures, then they would be able to see whether this paper is working or it's not working.
So can I just be clear? You commit the 2.4 million before you know what the readership is. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that at no point did TNA ever have accredited readership or circulation figures?
No, I'm not aware of that.
And were you aware of the take-up by customers on flights of the TNA newspaper or at the check-in counters?
No, I was not aware of that. Yeah.
Do you think it would have been relevant to know whether they were being picked up or just being left?
No.
Wouldn't be relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Corner, then want to just go to those SMS communications, if I may, to close off this aspect, because there are parts there that you deal with Mr. Mahlangu on. And we start at page 16 of Exhibit DD 17.
Right.
It starts with a message. I take it Mr. Mahlangu's messages are on the left and yours are on the right. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Mr. Mahlangu in that first message on page 16 says, okay, let me know. Let's see what we can do. I will try and buy you as much space as possible. Is that related to TNA at all?
No.
No.
Yeah.
If you go over the page to page 17, I think that this is where you start to engage on the TNA matter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what were you communicating to Mr. Mahlangu in this SMS?
I was sending him the feedback from the people from basically supply chain that were saying this is what's going on.
You say there that Nazim, this is in the first line, Nazim is not budging on the cost issue. He states that a George Motemo or Motema, who apparently left SAA, emailed him and agreed on us paying the cover price of R3.50 plus distribution charge of 50% per copy. The email was from a Gmail account. I do not know George. With this latest proposal, we're increasing the quantity by 4,900 copies. Surely they can consider the current price we are paying with press support of R2.31 and take the tab for delivery. Tried to get hold of him yesterday with no success. Martin is back today. Bulisa. Just tell me, why are you engaging with Mr. Mahlangu, the advisor to the minister, about the details of TNA subscriptions?
He's the one who brought these people. Yeah, he's the one who brought these people, and I was just telling him to say, this is the story. We can't do this thing. Yeah.
You were saying you can't do it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
And then you say you need to intervene. If we do it at the higher cost, then the process is much longer. What does that mean?
Then we need to get then basically they have to put together a much more support to what we have, and I don't know if they'll even get it. Yeah.
It wasn't a reference to the internal process in SAA.
No.
No.
Yeah.
It was that they would need to justify more. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. And then if you go over the page, there's a response, as I have it from Mr. Mahlangu to you. What does he say in response?
Which one? That telling that
yes.
all you can offer, telling you are constrained by your cost cutting.
And then you conclude, will do, my chief. Thanks for guidance. Have a great day. Did you communicate that you were constrained by your cost cutting to TNA when you concluded this?
The people say that. Yeah. I never spoke to them now. Yeah, it's the BAC team that was now working with the TNA people.
So was that before you got the submission from the BAC that they'd communicated that? Did you check with them whether they'd communicated that you had a limit given your cost cuttings?
Communicate with whom?
TNA.
Yeah, I think the people communicated with them. Yeah.
Did you inquire whether they had?
I stopped talking to TNA, and they started to deal with the people, and I just said, guys, let's remember that we're on a cost cutting exercise. Yeah.
Could we then just finally go to the signature that you appended to the submission? You'll find it at page 15.
Just before that, Ms. Hoffman, go back to page 17, Mr. Corner. That message that you sent to Mr. Mahlangu, you say in it, good morning, Mhlegazi. Mhlegazi is...
The message was sent to me.
Oh, that was sent to you?
Yes, that was sent to me.
Oh.
So I simply forwarded it to Mahlangu. Yeah.
Oh, you see,
Yes.
I looked at page
Yes.
16.
Yes.
You see there, one set of messages is green, another one is white, and the one that says Young Tengisa, which you said came from him, is white.
Yes.
So I thought that the green ones would be coming from here, from
Yes,
you to him.
No, what I'm saying, Che, it was a message that was sent to me.
Yeah.
And by my guy saying that this is all that we can do, we cannot do more.
Oh, that message
Yes.
was not, it was not a communication between you and him. It was yourself and your...
It was what was sent to me, and then I simply forwarded that
You
message
forwarded it to him?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, one of the questions was
Yes.
Bulisa. Was that somebody's name
Yes.
at the end of that message?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's all right. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify for my purposes then, the second message on page 17, is that you then typing thereafter? The first one, which says, good morning, Nhlekazi, you said was sent to you by somebody named Bulisa and forwarded to Mr. Mahlangu. Is that right?
Yes.
The one that appears after that, is that you now communicating?
Yes.
So you are saying to him, you need to intervene. If we do it at the higher cost, then the process is much longer. Is
Yes,
that right?
yes.
Thank you. And then
I'm sorry, then the next one is Watula,
Yes.
which is why you quiet, is that
yes.
right?
Yes.
You are sending that message
Yes.
to Mr. Mahlangu?
Yes.
Okay.
And then his response, just so we get this clear, because they are cut and it's a bit difficult to follow.
Yes.
His response is over the page 18 in full. That's where he says, tell him that's all you can offer. Is that right?
Yes.
To which you responded, will do, my chief. Thanks for guidance. Have a great day. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
If we can then just go to page 15 of DD 17, because above your signature there, Mr. Corner, is written requested and approved by. Do you see that?
Yes.
Were you the requester for this submission?
Remember, advocate, I said to you earlier on, they came to me. Yes. And I say to them, then I forwarded them to the BAC people to say, go and talk to this team. So I can't come in and basically do all the work that needs to be done. Mind you, in my delegation of authority goes up to 100 million. That's my delegation of authority. I can go and buy. I could have as well had gone to spend up to 100 million on either procuring these things or procuring consultancy stuff, up to 100 million. That's the level of my delegation of authority. However, I say go to the users, because these are people that use the papers. These are people that put them on the floor, and make sure that you agree with them. That was my communication with them. Yes.
So is it accurate to reflect you as both the requester and the approver? When people come to you, yes, and then you say go and do it. I don't know whether then I'm the one who is requesting, because they are the ones that are actually requesting themselves. But because I'm the face now of the organization, they come to me. Ordinarily, maybe they would have gone directly to anybody who was there prior to me, or to anybody else that was there. Yeah. Chair, just before we close, there was an issue in Mr. Corner's previous evidence where I asked him about an interaction with the Commission, where there had been an offer for him to meet with the Commission, and he indicated that he didn't have a recollection of it. We do have the correspondence.
Yes.
I don't propose to take the matter further, but it is correspondence on the 2nd of October 2019, where his then attorneys, I have it Mr. Zulu, is that correct?
That's correct.
Responds to decline the offer of the meeting. But I will make it available to Mr. Corner if you'd like to take a moment on
Does
it.
that jog your memory?
Well, I know Mr. Kuli is...
Yeah, but does that remind you of something you know or not?
Che, you see, I'm sitting here today, and the issue with the Commission became an issue of legal cost, because I'm coming here today without any legal representation, okay, or no legal advice, okay, because I was
Lawyers
someone...
are too expensive. Let's tell the truth.
So my issue was that, okay, if the Commission wants to see me, I've got nothing to hide, and it's for me to come and talk. It's up to the Commission to determine what they determine. For me, I'm just giving effect of events. You know what transpired during my days when I was working as the accounting officer. However, at the time, Ulu was still my attorney, and we inquired from the Commission to say, can the Commission pay the legal costs? And the Commission, I think at the time, wrote back and said they're not in a position to pay for the legal cost. I must go to my old employer to pay. And when we went to SAA, it was up and down. We're going up and down. And I think when I had to submit, then there was an issue of having to submit my affidavit. Then I said to the lawyers, okay, in the meantime, you go in and submit and deal with these other matters that are still there. Then then I will cover the costs whilst we are still waiting for the airline to come, obviously we know where SAA's financial situation is now. They said you're not going to be able to cover my costs.
Yes, but,
yeah.
what we are trying to establish is a simple point.
Yeah.
Do you have knowledge of the letter or communication that said you were declining the invitation from the Commission's legal team or investigators that you come and they
I don't know
assist
how I would have declined, because I submitted an
Yes.
affidavit and we apologized for having
Yes.
not submitted
Yes.
the affidavit. We submitted
Yes.
the affidavit and we
Yes.
responded to other issues that the
Yes.
Commission raised that were being that were being asked to
Yes,
asked
so
to us.
you did
Yeah.
not decline.
No, we're not
Yes.
declined, Chair. The only
Yes.
issue that I can clearly remember was the issue of financing the legal
Yes.
costs.
So
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think the position would
Yeah.
have been that the Commission would have been saying, we have lawyers who can take a statement from you, consult with you, and help prepare an affidavit from you. You won't be charged if we do it. We are inviting you to take advantage of that. I think that's what the letter was declining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may just be permitted to make it available to Mr. Corner.
Yes, yeah. Please do that, yeah.
And then, if I may just beg
Yes.
leave to hand up a copy to you. Chair, I just suggest that we put it, for record purposes, possibly paginated at the last page of Exhibit DD 17.
Yes.
That would make it paginated page 19. I note that in a cost-saving exercise, it's been printed on both sides of the page.
Yes.
Which is not our
Which
usual.
I don't like very much.
Indeed. We'll ensure that your copy has the two sides separately, Chair.
No, it's fine.
If
it's
we
fine.
may.
Yeah.
Chair, just to locate it in time. Mr. Corner is absolutely correct. He submitted his affidavit in response to Ms. Mzimela and Ms. Kutsia's evidence in July of 2019, and he had not engaged with the Commission until that point. It was thereafter that there were matters that needed to be followed up, the sorts of matters that have been explored today in the evidence with Mr. Corner, but it is the approach of the Commission's legal team and investigators on receipt of affidavits to investigate further. So what happens in this correspondence is that on the 25th of September, there is an email from one of the Commission's investigators to Mr. Corner's attorney. And it says, "Dear Mr. Kulu, our telecom earlier today serves as reference. The Commission would like to have a meeting with Mr. Corner to follow up on some aspects he deals with in his affidavit provided to the Commission. Please arrange with him and provide us with proposed suitable dates." So the engagements were after receipt of a first affidavit, but an indication that the Commission had further matters to engage with Mr. Corner on. The response to that came the same day just above it from Ms. Nkulu. "Dear sir, we confirm receipt of your email and confirm that we will revert once our client has provided us with instructions therein." And then the final word on this appears above that. It's an email of the 2nd of October 2019. I'm at page 19 of Exhibit DD 17. It's an email from Ms. Nkulu to the Commission's investigator, Mr. Madlala. And it says, "Dear sir, following inquiries, we're instructed that neither the Commission nor SAA are prepared to pay for Mr. Corner's legal fees in respect of representations before the Commission. In the circumstances, our client is not willing to incur further legal costs in his engagements with the Commission and must decline the proposed meeting." Mr. Corner, in your answer previously, you said you weren't aware of a declining of a meeting. Does this refresh your memory?
No, the only issue that we're dealing that I dealt with was the issue of money. Yeah, to come and say then, how do I then deal with my legal costs at the moment, because I'm still paying for those other legal costs that one incurred, and I said, okay, then it is what it is, you know. If I don't have legal advice, then how do I proceed? How do I then proceed going forward? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair, those are our questions.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, just two issues. How was TNA being treated differently from other newspapers as you understood the position? Was it that there was no agreement as yet between itself and SAA? Or how were these other newspapers treated? How was TNA treated? What were they talking about when they said they were not being treated in the same way as the other newspapers?
Chair, my humble understanding at the time was more an issue of volumes. That the other newspapers were getting more volumes than them, but it was more than an issue of readership and customer preference. And hence, that's why I said, let these people run. And if they can come back and justify and say the customers prefer this, then why should they not be treated as equal as everybody else?
Would that be what they told you, namely Mr. Nazim Hawa? Or
Yes.
Is that what he told you?
Yes.
Yeah. So they wanted to. They were saying that the numbers, when it comes to the copies of our newspaper that you buy, are lower than the numbers.
Yes.
And do you know whether that was factually correct?
Chair, when I tried to inquire with the operational staff, the view was that, but it's not. It's an audit issue and customer preference. Then I said, but sort out what is the market saying? Because when we're doing these things, we don't do it for ourselves. We do it for the market. If there is a market interest, then we move because we're satisfying a need that is out there. And that was my take. Then I'm not in a position to sit and even have a discussion of what the market needs or what the market wants. And however, then sit with these guys, and if it's there, if you guys can find each other, then we do it. If not, then we don't do it, because I don't know what the market, the sector in the specific area, what goes on. I'm not qualified enough to be able to talk as an expert. Yeah.
Would I be correct then to say that at the time that Mr. Hauer told you about this alleged different treatment, you didn't know whether that claim was correct, was true? You didn't know.
Hence, Chair, that's why I say let them engage with the people. Otherwise, ordinarily, what I would have done with my delegation of authority, I would have just gone to buy. I would have just gone to buy the papers and say, no, order some more papers. But I'm not in a position to sit and adjudicate those issues. Yeah.
And the memo that we looked at earlier on, you remember the memo that Ms. Hofmeyer?
It's page 13, Chair.
30?
13.
13.
Yes.
Yes, that memo, page 13. Was that memo sent to you by the relevant team pursuant to your sending Mr. Howard to that team to say, go and talk to them?
Yes, they had a document where they were already getting papers, Chair.
Yes.
But it was not signed. So I said, let's make sure that all our documents are compliant.
Yes.
So when this paper came, then that's when I assumed that they found each other, and I did not see anything untoward. At the time, I didn't even know who the shareholders for TNA were. Chair, I just said these are just ordinary newspaper suppliers. Yeah.
Well, what I find interesting is that Mr. Howard comes to you and seeks to justify his request for quite a drastic increase in the number of copies that SAA must buy from them on the basis of some alleged different treatment. But the memo that comes to you after you have sent him to this unit says nothing about any ill treatment. As I read it, I may have missed something. Is that your understanding too?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Remember that that's what he said to me. But I told him to go to the adjudication people.
Yes.
And deal with them.
Yes.
They are the ones that deal with these issues. Yeah. And
Yes.
then,
So,
yeah.
but we agree that
Yes.
the memo
Yeah.
doesn't refer to that
Yes.
claim
Yeah.
anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you said that this motivation, you thought that it did give a reason. I must confess, I don't see any reason here. Let's read it. Remember, we are looking for a reason that would justify why the volumes, the number of copies of the newspaper SAA was going to buy was to be doubled, okay? More than doubled, maybe. The motivation is SAA will be implementing the additional copies for a period of 12 months, while SAA is evaluating the current usage and scope in supplying our customers with publications. I don't see anything there in that sentence that says, while at this stage it's fine to get 2,000, here is a reason why we should double. Is there anything wrong with my reading of this?
Remember, Chair, there was no, what is the word? Audited view of how the market is working. When we are reading, when these market people, when these newspaper people release their publication figures, they tell you that we're using so many people are taking the papers, and so you know what the readership is of a specific newspapers, and that's how you measure out how popular or how acceptable in the market a specific newspaper is. So with these guys, they were still a new newspaper, and that was not there at the time. So
no, I accept
Yeah.
that. I want you to leave
Yes.
out whatever reason outside of the memo
Okay.
that you may have thought exists to justify. I'm
Okay.
just asking about this one. Are we not agreed that this doesn't give a reason for doubling the number of copies? Maybe there is a reason somewhere which was not stated, but are we not agreed that this doesn't give the reason?
Chair, everyone, when we start looking in hindsight, and that's the good thing about hindsight. When you start looking in hindsight, then you might take a different view. Yeah, but I mean, at the time when I made the decision, I was comfortable with. I thought that this was a good reason for me.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I just want you to appreciate
Yeah.
the distinction that I'm making.
Sure. No, I hear you.
Namely,
Chair.
you might have had a reason which was operating in your mind
Yeah.
why you thought increasing the number of copies was justified.
I hear you, Chair.
But all I'm simply saying is the memo doesn't seem to contain any such reason. You accept
I hear
that?
you. Yes.
Yes. Secondly, when Mr. Howard came to you and complained that they were not being treated like the other newspapers, my understanding of what your evidence is that you had no issue with staying with the same number of copies that you were buying from them as SAA. But if you were given, if the team to whom you referred to came back and said, yes, there is a need, then you would look at that. Is my understanding of your evidence correct?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Yes. But now the team comes back. One, they don't give a reason that justifies the doubling the number. Two, the GM operation says, actually there's no budget in operations for this, and this thing falls under operations. But nevertheless, you seem to go out of your way, and you must feel free to say you are not going out of your way. Yeah, I'll give you a chance. You to say, look, we will do A, B, C, D in, I don't know whether in other departments, and therefore there will be some money. So we will, I will approve this. But I want to be fair to you. Just comment. I see you want to comment on this. It seems to me like you are going out of your way. Maybe you are not, and I want you to be able to say, no, I'm not, and this was the position.
Chair, I think with respect to this whole thing, and I'm just putting it as plainly as it is. Yeah, from the numbers that are involved, it's not something that I would go out of my way to deal with this. Yeah. I think it is clear from my communication with Mahlang. That's why I said you can have the SMSs that I really did not care about this thing, whether this thing was done or it was not done. I was not forcing everybody to do it, and my view was that if it can be done, let it be done. If it can't be done, then we're not going to do it. Two, it was an issue of saying if the budget, I knew where the budget was going to sit, and I knew all the initiatives that we're going to embark. So if the people came and said this thing can work, then we work it. If they come and say it cannot work, then it won't work. Now, obviously, I know from where I sit today that because unfortunately this is a Gupta newspaper, then it becomes a bit of an anomaly to do it, to come and say, why would you have given a Gupta newspaper? At the time when I was even doing this thing, I was not even aware, Chair, that this is a Gupta newspaper. I didn't even there was not even a personal benefit, if ever I even wanted a personal benefit from getting into from doing this thing. I did not know. All I knew was that there's a newspaper, and these guys just wanted to put additional supply on the plane. So for me to have made an additional 2 million rand additional expense on something which the monies we were releasing billions in terms of spending, it's not something that would have affected my decision-making process in terms of the numbers that are there, as long as the people in supply chain come and say, no, we can put the additional newspaper. Now, in hindsight, and hence that's why I said earlier on, Chair, that in hindsight everybody sits. Had I known that this is a Gupta newspaper, I would have acted differently. I would have even told them not to even come and talk to me, because I wanted nothing to do with these people. In their own time, when this document is being signed at the time, they had already made a decision that my neck, I'm gone within the organization. So it's at the time, I'm not. When I'm making this decision, it's got nothing to do with Guptas. For me, this is just a newspaper that is there. Yeah, and that's my own humble opinion, Chair, on this matter.
The only other question for me is. What benefit was seen for SAA in adding newspapers?
Chair, when you are having when you have an airline, it is always the best thing to have multiple readerships for your passengers. You don't want to limit your passengers in terms of what we read. In fact, when I look at what we spend and what the other international airlines spend, if you have flown on Emirates, you'll see that Emirates has a much broader set of newspapers and magazines for you to go through. And hence, that's why one was just looking at give the customers a much broader thing to read, because at the time, we could not even, our market spend had been reduced drastically. So what we were trying to do, we were trying to look at adding any additional initiatives that you can at least give the customer a little choice, that you can give the customer a little choice that the customer can have when he's flying out there, instead of him having either a business day and that's it, or the Star and then that's it. Let him choose a Star, let him choose this, let him choose another one.
And customer here, you are referring to the passenger.
To the flying passengers,
to
that's
the
correct.
Passenger, not
Yes.
to TNA.
Not to TNA, no, no, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Nothing arising?
Nothing arising.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kona, for coming to give evidence. If we need you, we'll ask you to come back. But thank you very much, and I hope that we haven't prejudiced you much in terms of your medication and your son. Thank you very much. You are excused. We appreciate
Chair.
the fact that you made yourself available for longer.
Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Hofmeyr, we are at 21 minutes past 2. It looks like we may have to sit beyond 4 o'clock. Is that right?
Chair, if we return sort of 20 past 3, we may want to get at least a bit of the evidence of the next witness underway. So
Yes.
maybe to 4:30 we can check arrangements and whether that's
Yes.
feasible.
Yes. And the next witness will be quite longish, is that right?
Indeed. She will certainly
Yes.
go over to tomorrow. It's
Yes.
quite a detailed testimony.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's adjourn for lunch now, and then we will resume at 3:30. So we might take an hour, or I will be a little flexible if it suits everybody, so that we go some way in regard to her evidence before we adjourn.
Thank you,
ultimately.
Chair.
Yeah. We adjourn.
All rise.
Yeah, I'm coming through. Where are you? Yeah, yeah. Which one? Ground floor. Yeah, come through. Okay, okay, sure. Yeah. Where is the man?
Yeah, check. Check, check. Check. Check, check. Check. 2, yeah? 2. Yeah, yeah. 2, check. Check, yeah. check,
buttons all the time. Don't press it on and off so that you don't have to press it all the time. Then just keep it on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, we are about to commence the second investigation area that will be presented in this session of aviation evidence. And what I propose to do is sketch, just by way of background, what this area will focus on, and then with your leave, Chair, to deal with a number of procedural aspects so that we can, in a sense, get those out of the way and then let the evidence flow. If procedural issues arise day to day, we will, of course, draw them to your attention. But my proposal is that we endeavour to deal both with the background and the procedural aspects this afternoon. Chair, the second area of investigation involves South African Airways Technical. South African Airways Technical is a wholly owned subsidiary of SAA, and you'll hear witnesses, and probably I will do it as well, referring to it as SART, because that is the name by which it's commonly known. And what the investigation has focused on is two transactions that SART entered into in 2016. The first of those relates to component support services that SART requires in order to repair and maintain aircraft parts. Starting in 2014 to 2016, SART embarked on no less than 5 various tenders in order to award these services to a successful bidder. It was eventually awarded in mid-2016 to a joint venture of a local company called JM Aviation and a United States company called AAR Supply Chain Inc. The value of the contract is over more than 1.2 billion rand. And in terms of the agreement between the JV partners, JM Aviation earns 5%, I beg your pardon, on all invoices raised under the contract, and the contract is for 5 years. The investigation appears to indicate that the joint venture of AAR and JM Aviation ought to have been disqualified from the tender process. And this is so because they were communicating with the head of SART procurement, asking for input on their bid submission prior to it being submitted, as well as on their draft JV agreement. The investigation also appears to indicate that despite the fact that it ought to have been disqualified, it was not. It went on to be awarded the contract and then to conclude an agreement that substantially reduced the obligations it had undertaken when it submitted its bid. All of these were to the detriment, ultimately, of SART, the contracting party. The Commission will hear evidence from a witness who says that she used to be the partner of this AAR US-based company, but was later discarded for JM Aviation, the local company. And she will testify that when she started to be squeezed out of the partnership, she was privy to various corrupt plans on the part of SART officials. The evidence that you will hear over the next few days will also relate to various money flows and identify where SART officials appear to have received personal benefits during the process of decision-making and contracting afterwards. Chair, the second transaction relates to a contract that was entered into between SAA now and Swissport South Africa. That was a contract to provide ground handling services to SAA for 5 years, and it was approved by the board of SAA in March 2016. There was no tender process that preceded that award of the 5-year contract from 2016 to 2021, at least not in the lead up to that particular decision. There was a prior process, which we've actually heard evidence on from Dr. Dawa, but nothing that preceded the March 2016 decision. Chair, tacked onto the contract that was concluded between SAA and Swissport was a clause of the agreement that provided as follows. Swissport was to procure or arrange the procurement of all recently acquired surplus SART GPUs. Now, I must just pause for a moment. GPUs is also an acronym that you'll hear quite a bit about. That relates to ground handling units, and you'll hear in the evidence what they do. But what the clause provided was that Swissport would acquire all recently acquired SART GPUs at their current book value, fair market value, or such other valuation as may be mutually agreed. And once the agreement between SAA and Swissport was concluded, SART was then charged with entering into negotiations to sell those GPUs, which the provision of the contract between SAA and Swissport had indicated would be sold to Swissport. But what ended up happening was that SART did not sell the GPUs to Swissport. Instead, it sold them to JM Aviation. And it was the same JM Aviation who was then later to be awarded the component support tender in its joint venture with AAR Corporation. SART sold the GPUs to JM Aviation for just over 3 million rand. And the next day, JM Aviation sold them to Swissport at a profit of more than 6 million rand. A year after SART sold the GPUs to JM Aviation, who sold them on to Swissport, SART had to lease those same GPUs back from Swissport at a cost to date of more than 8 million rand. Precisely how JM Aviation entered the picture and why it was entitled to make a 6 million rand profit in a day will be part of what is explored in the evidence. Chair, there have been numerous forensic investigations conducted for SART in relation to these two contracts. They have formed a basis for the investigation of the Commission, but the Commission's investigation has gone well beyond them. And it is for that reason that we don't present them to you as though they would be the basis for fact-finding. It is our submission that the fact-finding should be based on the evidence that you will hear over the course of the next week, and that will be based on the independent and further investigations that the Commission has conducted. Chair, with that background in place, I'd like to move to some of the procedural aspects. Chair, there will be 4 witnesses who will testify over the next week in relation to this area of investigation. All of the witnesses have been summoned. Some of them have provided affidavits and statements to the Commission in advance of their evidence. Other of the witnesses have not. And those witnesses who have declined to provide an affidavit or statement to the Commission have been informed that they will simply be questioned when they arrive for their testimony on the matters that are being investigated. Chair, insofar as witnesses generally are concerned, we believe it's important to indicate to you today what the process of engagements has been, because they will have a bearing on an aspect I'll address in a moment. Chair, during the course of the Commission's investigations into these 2 contracts, numerous attempts have been made to meet with all the pertinent witnesses who could shed light on these aspects of the investigation. And these attempts have been met with varied success. On some occasions, no response is received to the endeavours that the Commission has made to engage with persons. In other instances, witnesses have refused to meet with the Commission unless they are provided with a list of questions that will be asked of them in advance of the meeting. The legal team and the investigators have refused to provide such a list. Instead, every person who has been requested to meet with us has been given a list of the focus areas of the investigation that would be covered in the course of the meeting in order for them to be able to prepare for that meeting. Sometimes that has been enough, and then witnesses have met with us. On other occasions, it has not, and meetings have still been refused. Where, despite a witness's refusal to meet with the Commission's legal team and investigators, their evidence has nonetheless been deemed critical to the work of this Commission, those witnesses have been summoned to give evidence and will do so over the next many days. Chair, there's one exception to that general approach, and I need to highlight it at the outset. You'll recall from the background that I sketched of the component support services contract that it was awarded to a joint venture comprising a local company, JM Aviation, and an American company, AAR Supply Chain Inc. Since late September 2019, the Commission has endeavored to engage with AAR's representatives, and there is a full pack of correspondence that we've prepared setting out those interactions. Chair, if I may beg leave to hand it up. I don't propose that we go through it in detail, but if there's a point at which a reference should be made, it would be useful for you to have it available to you. You'll see in the correspondence that AAR is represented by Mr. John Bell of Baker & McKenzie. He is in attendance today, and I have provided him with a copy of this bundle, insofar as I may make reference to it now. Chair, the interactions with AAR commenced on the 27th of September last year, when the Commission sent a letter to Mr. Bell, who we could gather from previous correspondence and in fact litigation involving this tender had represented AAR at the time. And we indicated in that correspondence that the Commission's investigations had indicated that there may have been corruption involved in the award of this tender to the joint venture, and it requested a meeting with AAR representatives to explore three things: the role that AAR played in the bid submission of the joint venture JM Aviation and AAR, its role in the conclusion of the contract with SAAT, and performance under the contract. Chair, that was met with a response from the attorneys acting for AAR, the attorneys who'd previously acted for AAR, and the response at that stage was, and I quote, "They did not hold instructions in relation to responding to the correspondence at this stage," end quote. The Commission therefore followed up for clarity. We inquired, did that mean that the attorneys were not acting for AAR, or that they were acting but had been instructed not to respond to the Commission? And if they were not acting, could they please provide direct contact details? The response came on the 21st of October. That response indicated that AAR would like clarity on the nature and extent of the discussion that the Commission wanted to have with AAR. And in that regard, they said, and in light of the history of the matter, we'd appreciate understanding any areas for focus or specific inquiries from the Commission. That was responded to on the basis that the areas of focus were the three that had previously been identified on the 27th of September. There was then a further follow-up. Were we willing to provide more information? And we responded to say, no, the areas of focus will be those as set out on the 27th of September. And in response to that communication, we received a detailed response on the 18th of November from AAR's attorneys. Chair, you'll find that at page 17. There's one part that I will read into the record, and if it's convenient, you may wish to look at it, but I don't suggest it's directly necessary. Chair, what AAR's attorneys said on that date, the 18th of November 2019, is in essence the following. They said that they were not prepared to meet with the Commission because of the lack of transparency and fair process. They highlighted that because of the, quote, uncertain nature of the Commission's points of inquiry, it is difficult to understand which representatives would have meaningful, first-hand personal knowledge sufficient to answer truthfully and accurately the questions put to them. They also said at paragraph 6 of the letter the following. In addition, the public nature of the Commission's inquiries, the methods of interrogation and media reporting in relation to previous testimony before the Commission has created a situation where the public perception is that entities called before the Commission or being subject of its mandate are automatically deemed to have associated itself with or committed misconduct, bribery, and/or corruption. AAR, as a US multinational company committed to compliance, denies any such association and is not willing to subject itself to an unsubstantiated and inequitable trial by media. The letter then goes on and states that AAR is based in the United States of America with, quote, no local presence in South Africa, end quote. And it went on to say that it would therefore have to incur significant costs and time to make its representatives available in South Africa. It stated that the contract was lawfully awarded to AAR and that its obligations under it were being fulfilled. And it concludes at paragraph 9 to say, we trust that the above explains AAR's position and reiterate that AAR will be willing to consider written questions presented to it by the Commission. Chair, the Commission responded to that letter on the 10th of December. And in essence, the response was as follows. We noted that it was regrettable that a company who had contracted to a state-owned enterprise for a value of more than 1 billion rand was not willing to meet with the Commission. We responded to the alleged uncertain nature of the topics to be addressed and explained that they were in fact entirely clear. We were interested in the three aspects identified in the 27 September letter. What role they played in the bid submission, the conclusion of the contract, and the performance thereafter. Chair, we even responded to the allegation that it was not easy to identify who the relevant people at AAR would likely be. We indicated it was fairly clear. It was anyone involved in the bid submission, the conclusion of the contract, or performance under it. But we didn't stop there. We went so far as to provide them with the names of the 6 employees of AAR that our investigations had revealed had been involved in those various stages of the process. We also queried what it meant for AAR to state that it did not have a, quote, local presence in South Africa, because we pointed out that it had been awarded a contract since mid-2016. It had been performing under that contract since that time, and to a state-owned entity, and in respect of which, at the 10th of December 2019, it had been paid 954 million rand. We then offered a further opportunity to meet on the 13th of January 2020. The response came on the 10th of January. AAR's attorneys indicated that it was still not willing to meet because the Commission's response had not sufficiently addressed their concerns. And it did clarify the question about local presence. It said that although it provides services to a state-owned entity, it had no, and I quote, physical local presence in South Africa, and none of its employees are based here. Chair, the Commission responded again on the 14th of January 2020 to that communication, again emphasizing that it was regrettable that there would be no opportunity to meet, but it then explained the Rule 3.3 process to AAR, because by that stage the Commission had received the affidavit of Ms. Sambo, who will be the first witness today. And it was explained that there is a process that is followed and they would in due course receive notice as an implicated person. That notice was duly served, it was sent to AAR's attorneys, and on the 19th of January, we received a letter from the lawyers of AAR Corporation and some of its employees who'd received the Rule 3.3 notice. Chair, that's the last letter in the correspondence bundle, and you'll find it commencing at page 27.
The date there is 29 January.
Apologies, Chair, I made an error. Indeed, it was 29 January that we received
So
that
I was
response.
still trying to look for 19 January.
Yes, no, that is my error.
Yeah.
As I have it, the Rule 3.3 notices were sent out around the 15th of January, and then the response came on the 29th of January. That's the letter at page 27 of the bundle. The letter begins by indicating what it is not. AAR's attorneys make it clear that it's not a response to Ms. Sambo's evidence in terms of Rule 3.9 of the Commission's rules.
I'm sorry, is it the letter of 29 January that you are
Yes,
talking about now.
it is.
Okay,
And if you
all
go
right.
to paragraph 3, you'll see it's indicated there what the letter is not. It is not a submission under Rule 3.9, and the Commission should not misconstrue it as such. Our purpose is not to address each and every allegation contained in the Rule 3.3 notice and Ms. Sambo's affidavit. Our not doing so should not be construed as an acceptance thereof or a waiver of any of our clients' rights. They go on in the letter to state that the Commission's objective of gathering evidence from witnesses competent to testify about matters in Ms. Sambo's affidavit would not be advanced through AAR's testimony before the Commission. And the reason for that is given that no current AAR employee or officer has personal knowledge of all or substantially all of the operative facts alleged by Ms. Sambo in her affidavit, and AAR is therefore not in a position accurately to answer questions relating to Ms. Sambo's allegations. Chair, despite that, the letter goes on to indicate why Ms. Sambo's version should not be believed and is to be discredited. I pause at this point to say,
How does that happen?
well, Chair, that was going to be my point. It's not entirely clear to us how you can, in the same breath, say that the version should be rejected and say that there is no person currently in the employ of AAR who can accurately answer questions relating to Ms. Sambo's allegations.
Yes.
Chair, it is
They
our...
say nobody has personal knowledge.
No person has personal knowledge, but carefully, of all or substantially all of the operative facts. And as a consequence, AAR is not in a position, and I quote, to accurately answer questions relating to Sambo's allegations.
I wonder whether that is meant to say no one has got personal knowledge of all the facts, and no one has got personal knowledge of what is substantially all or whatever.
Chair.
So whoever has personal
Yes.
knowledge has very limited.
Yes, some personal knowledge, just not all or substantially all of it.
Okay, yes.
I think the point for present purposes is it is not a denial that there are people who do have some knowledge. Chair, it is our submission that this is not an appropriate manner in which to deal with the Commission. The Commission has a set of rules. They set out precisely what implicated people are required to do when they dispute the evidence of a witness. Chair, we're aware of the rules. They must provide a statement or an affidavit. They must clearly identify what is disputed and the grounds of dispute. And Chair, pursuant
And
to a
if they
ruling...
don't do that, they can't be taken as taking issue with
Indeed.
that evidence.
And Chair, that leads me to the procedural point that flows from this. I will go through in a moment what other responses have been received to Rule 3.3 notices in respect of Ms. Sambo's evidence. Subject to your direction, Chair, it is not our intention to put this letter of the 29th of January and its contents to Ms. Sambo.
Yeah.
It is our submission that if implicated persons would like their version to be taken into account by this Commission, they must do so in accordance with its rules.
Yeah.
Chair, the upshot of this is that at a procedural level, we will not put the version, in inverted commas, that
Yes.
appears in this letter to Ms. Sambo during her evidence. But, Chair, it also leaves the Commission in a somewhat unsatisfactory position, because over the next week, the Commission will hear evidence from witnesses who were integrally involved in this. The Director of JM Aviation has been summoned to give evidence. But what is not possible is for this Commission to exercise summonsing powers beyond its borders.
Of course.
And so no summons can be issued, in fact, in relation to AAR or its employees. Chair, in due course, at the conclusion of the evidence, we will make submissions about what further steps, if any, we recommend should be taken in relation to AAR.
Yeah.
Chair, I indicated that I would deal with the other responses to the 3.3 notices. Ms. Sambo's affidavit was received timeously and enabled us to ensure that the Rule 3.3 notices were sent out in more than the 14 days. I think it was about 16 to 18 days. We've received responses from 3 implicated persons. The first of those is Mr. Mcebisi Jonas. He has not put in an application to cross-examine. He has put in a statement supported by 2 confirmatory affidavits. We received it late overnight, and there was an indication that a fully commissioned version would be available to us in due course. It is our intention to put that version to Ms. Sambo in the course of her evidence, as we've done previously. When the process is run efficiently enough, it means you get the version before the witness gives evidence, and it can be probed thereafter. Chair, the second response was from Ms. Yake Kwinana, a former member of the board of both SAAT and SAA. She similarly does not apply to cross-examine Ms. Sambo, but has put up a statement with her version of facts, and that version, similarly with your leave, will be put to Ms. Sambo during her evidence. The third response to the Rule 33 notices comes from Ms. Nonsasa Mamela. She is the witness who has been summoned and was the head of procurement at SART at the time of these 2 contracts. She is scheduled to give evidence on Friday. Her version will similarly be put to Ms. Sambo by Mr. Mkiwe, who will be presenting her evidence so that Ms. Sambo can deal with them. Issues that arise out of that evidence will be put to Ms. Mamela when she comes on Friday. I will be presenting her evidence. And as we did in the previous aviation session, it will be our recommendation to you thereafter that once there's been that full interrogation of the facts, we would then go back to Ms. Mamela and ask her whether she persists with the cross-examination application. Chair, the second witness in the order after Ms. Sambo is Mr. Human. Now, Mr. Human is the acting head of department for supply chain management at SART. He effectively occupies the position that Ms. Mamela used to occupy at the time that these contracts were concluded. Chair, on procedural aspects in relation to Mr. Human, the Commission received his affidavit deposed to only on Thursday last week. That was the 30th of January. We moved swiftly, and the following day, we issued 26 notices to implicated persons, but those went out on Friday of last week. Mr. Human is scheduled to give evidence from Thursday. So that notice will not be as much as the 14 days, but it will be just short of a week. And we have made great efforts through the Secretariat to ensure that implicated persons have received both the statement plus its annexures. It is an extremely lengthy bundle. I think it ranges to about 7 files, but they are in constant communication with implicated persons to ensure that they've received them. To date, we have not had responses, but we will update you on that in the lead up to Thursday's evidence. Chair, I've just been reminded that there is also, I had neglected this, a statement from Mr. Zwane in respect of Ms. Sambo's statement, and that similarly will be put to Ms. Sambo in the course of her evidence. Mr. Zwane.
Mr. Musabenzi Zwane or another Zwane?
No, another Zwane. This is Mr. Zwane who occupied
the one
position.
who was acting CEO at some stage at SAA.
Indeed, Chair. That's
Okay.
precisely right.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, so that's the evidence for Thursday. The evidence for Friday is Ms. Mamela, who's been summoned to appear. She's provided 2 statements to the Commission and is clear in those statements that she does not implicate anyone, and so no Rule 33 process has been followed. She will come and be questioned on it and related matters. And Mr. Nzeku, to whom I referred earlier, who's the Director of JM Aviation, he's been summoned to give evidence on Tuesday. He's not provided any statement to the Commission in advance of that evidence, and so he will be simply questioned when he attends. Chair, there is one more matter of process that I must deal with, and it relates to developments that occurred yesterday in the course of the investigation. Chair, in the course of yesterday, we were contacted by Ms. Sambo to indicate that she had found a flash disk, which is a flash disk that she refers to in her evidence. And
Or the one that she says in the statement she could not find or
Indeed.
didn't know where it was.
Indeed, precisely
Yes.
that one.
Oh, she found it.
She did. Her evidence, we'll go into some detail about
Yes.
how she found it, from whom
Yes.
she got it, etc.
Okay.
But it's important that I just relay some procedural processes that were followed after she made this known to the Commission yesterday. Chair, Ms. Sambo brought it to the officers of the
I
Commission.
just wanted to say that I noticed that the sentence in her statement that talks about that missing part
Yes.
was very carefully worded.
Well, I'm sure that that will be explored in her evidence.
Yeah.
Chair, Ms. Sambo indicated it was found. She brought it to the Commission's offices yesterday evening. She was met by a member of the investigation team and what we call the DFT team, the data forensics team of the Commission. She handed over the flash disk. Chair, before I continue, there will be an affidavit from the respective members of the Commission's investigation team to this effect. It's in the process of being prepared, though I haven't been able to provide it yet to you. But it's important just for chain of custody reasons that I give you this background today. She handed it over. They took steps to image the flash disk, which is effectively make a copy of it using the software of the Commission, which I understand, and this will be evidenced in the affidavit, also provides a certificate of authentication insofar as the copy is an accurate copy. After that took place, the various processes in relation to preserving the evidence were followed. It was placed into an evidence bag, it was sealed, and this was done in the presence of all concerned and signed by the necessary witnesses. And all of that will be now taken to the secure facility of the data forensic team, so that if at any point in future proceedings it is necessary for that original hard flash disk to form a basis in the evidence, there will be a full chain of custody, at least insofar as it came to the attention of the Commission and its investigators.
Okay.
Chair, those are the procedural aspects, unless my learned friend tells me I've forgotten anything, but I think that takes care of it. If I may then just hand over to Mr. Mbikiwa, who will be presenting the evidence of Ms.
Yes,
Sambo.
thank you. That's fine. So, Ms. Hoffman, I see that now we get to the real Advocate Mbikiwa.
Yes, indeed.
The name there, while you were talking, was saying you were Advocate Mbikiwa.
Well, it's probably a step up for me.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mbikiwa.
Chair, I intend to proceed directly into Ms. Sambo's evidence, so if she could be sworn in.
Yes. Please administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Sibongile Rejoice Sambo.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the file containing Ms. Sambo's affidavit, I would ask if it could be please admitted as Exhibit DD18.
The file containing Ms. Sibongile Rejoice Sambo's affidavit and annexures will be admitted and marked Exhibit DD18.
Ms. Sambo, in front of you, you'll have a file on the spine of which is marked DD18. If you look in the top right-hand corner of each page, you'll see those red numbers. Those are the page numbers that I'll be referring you to during the course of your evidence. Can I ask you to turn to, well, firstly, can I ask you to identify the document that's on page 1 in front of you?
It's the affidavit.
Is that the affidavit that you provided to the Commission?
Yes, this is the affidavit that I provided to the Commission.
And can I ask you to turn to page 42?
Yes.
Is that your signature?
Yes, that's my signature.
Thank you. Ms. Sambo, before I get into the detail of your affidavit, you speak at various points throughout it about the difficulties that you have remembering many of the
I'm
events.
sorry, Mr. Mpikiwa, I may have missed it. Did you ask her to confirm that its contents are true and correct to cover in case you leave out anything?
Indeed, Chair. Do you confirm that the contents of the affidavit are true and correct?
Confirmed.
And are there any corrections that you would wish to make to it at this stage?
On the affidavit, yes, the one correction is about the affidavit. It's about the flash disk that we found. My legal can assist me on other things, but it's mainly the flash disk.
Thank you. If there are any others, we can address them in due course as we get to them.
And maybe
Yes.
that one, maybe you don't need to correct anything because at the time you deposed to the affidavit, you didn't
Yes.
know where it was.
Yes.
Indeed.
It's only subsequently that you found it.
Yes.
Is that what you thought you should correct?
Yes.
Okay, no, you don't need to correct that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Sambo, at various points in your affidavit, you speak about the difficulties that you have remembering the exact sequence of some of the events that you speak about. Various implicated parties who have submitted statements and made applications to cross-examine have picked up on this. And on the basis of that, they say that you should not be believed. And so I'd like to begin your evidence by asking you just first to describe for the Commission what the memory issues are that you suffer from.
Okay. Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, I would like to deal with all the personal comments because I received the comments on Friday. I just want to state that I have made myself completely vulnerable by being honest about the condition affecting my mental health, which is depression. And depression is not an easy subject to talk about. And it's not depression that I've always suffered from, but this particular case with AAR and SAT has driven me to this condition. I have made the disclosure so that the Zondo Commission and parties reading my statement would understand my struggle to come to terms with it. I don't expect to be ridiculed by the medical condition. The depression stated when I was dealing with these things that were beyond my control, with people more powerful and influential than myself, being the people mentioned in my statement. I was the young entrepreneur wanting to succeed as a black female-owned business. I was overwhelmed by people I met who sat in positions of power. The betrayal by women in those positions of power went to the core of my being. That betrayal sent me to this dark hole of depression that has seen me in different hospitals in and out for the last 4 years. The allegations made that my loss of memory is selective and convenient shows a lack of understanding and compassion for people suffering with depression. When this case was happening, I realized that I'm a small player. I'm a black-owned startup company wanting to break into the industry, a very difficult industry of aviation. I looked up to people of power for real empowerment and not corruption. I was enthusiastic. I was a naive businesswoman. I trusted the verbal agreement that it would materialize. When I went to SAT, I would completely trust the people that I've met at SAT. I wanted to be their friend because I believed that they would guide me and assist me in what I wanted to achieve as an entrepreneur. And my information has been very consistent with other investigations such as the Ernst & Young and Open Waters. I was struggling to enforce the contract with AAR, and the details thereof will be discussed later. And that is what I'm putting forward to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sambo, can you clarify for me what the memory issues are that you do suffer from? Do you forget events, or is it the detail, or is it the sequence?
It is the sequence of events that some I don't remember because there's no documentation that would remind me. This has happened over a few years ago, and with the passage of time, my memory has diminished. So it is the sequence of events, but a whole lot of things I remember, and I will talk to that.
Am I correct to understand your evidence to be that you will remember all the events? What you might not remember is the sequence of how they happened, which one happened first, which one came after.
That's correct, Chair.
But you will remember the events that they did take place.
Most of the events
Most of
I
the
remember. Where
events,
I
yeah.
don't remember, I will indicate that I don't remember.
Yes.
Yes.
But are you saying you are able to say, even with regard to the sequence, are you able to say that's because of the depression, and it's not simply because it's been a few years since these things happened?
The passage of time and the depression,
A combination of both.
a combination.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Sambo, can we pick it up then in your affidavit from paragraph 2, where you begin to talk about your qualifications? Can you take us through what qualifications you have?
I hold a Bachelor of Administration from the University of Zululand, a Bachelor of Administration Honours from UNISA, an advanced program in organizational development from UNISA, a marketing certificate from Institute of Marketing Management, a mining executive preparation program from VETS. I also completed an international executive development program with Gibbs and Rollins College in the United States of America. I'm currently registered for my master's degree with Gibbs.
Thank you. And Ms. Sambo, how did you get into aviation?
I started SRS Aviation in 2004. I'm a human resources practitioner by profession. However, I have always loved aeroplanes. The love for aeroplanes have never left my mind. I come from Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga, and my mother took me to boarding school in KwaZulu-Natal in Under Seminary. And I remember back then, I used to force my parents to book me a flight from Durban to Nelspruit once in a while, threatening that I will fail if they don't. And that's how much I really loved aviation. So later on, I applied to become an air hostess, now called cabin crew. I was never successful because I've always been below the height that they required. And then I joined Human Resources Department because of the qualifications I've already indicated, worked for various companies. But post-1994, when we were encouraged to start businesses, for me it was a no-brainer, but to go for what lies within my soul, which is the love for aviation. And in 2004, that's when I registered SRS Aviation, SRS being my initials, Sibongile Rejoice Sambo. I tendered for various businesses in the industry, and my first contract was working with the military in peacekeeping mission operations using those large IL-76 aeroplanes. That's how I began my company.
Just out of curiosity, did your threat to your parents work?
My mom is here, she can attest to that.
When you say
yes,
they
I-
didn't book you a flight, you would fail.
They did, I did fly once in a while
Oh,
to Nelspruit, yes.
And so tell us a little bit about what SRS Aviation does.
Okay. SRS Aviation is the first 100% black female-owned aviation company in South Africa that provides private jets and helicopters, fully licensed by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. We've got a license on Part 135. Those are medium-sized to large aeroplanes. Part 127, which is the helicopter operations, single operations, and we are licensed to fly both locally and abroad. So we've got domestic and international licenses. And recently we've added the drones on our licenses.
And how did SRS, how did its relationship with South African Airways begin?
In 2009, when there was an economic meltdown, as SRS Aviation, we decided that we wanted to explore other business opportunities within the aviation industry. Most companies were not flying enough with the private jets. They had gone back to flying through airlines. So we decided to diversify, and our diversification strategy was to supply fuel and also to supply aircraft parts and components. So we went to South African Airways to go and request for an enterprise development so that we can see if we can do business with them. The agreement was at a very arm's length because they said they could only offer us offices at SAA Airways Park. So our offices were based there, but in terms of business, we needed to follow all procurement processes. So going from SAA to SAA Technical, it was the interest now of supplying these aircraft parts and components, and we introduced SRS Aviation on the database, where on a daily basis we receive quotations to supply aircraft parts and components. Then I will talk later about the other parts of the components.
You mentioned an enterprise development agreement. What did that provide for?
The enterprise development contract that we signed then with SAA provided only the office space. I brought in my own furniture. We couldn't have access to their telephone, so we used our own mobile phones, we used our own internet. So the only thing that they provided was office space, and they will claim their BE enterprise development points on their BE scorecard.
And I think your evidence is that the included with the office space was access to boardroom facilities.
Yes, we had access to boardroom facilities.
Ms. Sambo, can you tell us about this delegation that you went on? You went on a delegation to the United States.
On the 24th to the 28th of October 2011, I was part of the South African delegation. The invitation came from Ms. Nomvume Magaqa, who was the South African ambassador, who inaugurated the US-South Africa Women Business Forum that was to be held in Chicago, in the United States of America. SRS Aviation was invited as one of the companies that accompanied then Honorable Ms. Lulu Xingwane and other honorable deputy ministers to Chicago for this trip. Part of the invitation, when the DTI invite you into a mission, they give you where the mission is going and what they expect to achieve from the mission. And they give us time to indicate which companies are we interested to be introduced to, where the mission is going to. And for me, one of the companies was AAR Corporation in Chicago.
I want to get to that in a moment, but just tell me how you came to be involved in the delegation. How were you selected, or did you apply?
No, at that time, the DTI already had SRS Aviation on their database as an entrepreneur in the aerospace sector, and we normally just received invitations. And sometimes they send an invitation, but you must still fill in an application form to participate on that mission, because the Department of Trade and Industry had or still have an EMEA scheme, which will then take care of all the costs involved, the flights, the accommodation, the stipend whilst we are away. So we were invited and we followed all the necessary processes to participate on the missions.
And you say that you identified AAR as a potential partner. What did you know about AAR at that stage?
What I read on the internet from their website, what they provide, that they are a very big company. They're not only in Chicago, and because I wanted to diversify into that space, it made sense for me that whilst we are in Chicago, where their headquarters are, it will make sense for me to be introduced and see if we can forge a working relationship.
I'm sorry, did you come across their name after you knew about the delegation or the trip that was going to happen, or you had done some research and just came across them much earlier than that?
No, it was around that same time.
It was connected with knowing
yes, because I was looking for a company that supply aircraft parts in Chicago.
Okay.
Then their name popped.
Okay.
And what sort of strategic partnership were you interested in?
I wanted to become their partner, a full partner in this environment. When I say this environment, in South Africa, with an aim to expand to the rest of the African continent. So when I went to them, I wanted to invite them to explore business opportunities in Africa with SRS Aviation as their partner.
And as part of this delegation, did you have the opportunity to meet with people at AAR?
Yes, on the second day of the activities, we were transported to the different companies that we wanted to see, and I went straight to AAR with some members from the Department of Trade and Industry in Chicago, the trade division. So yes, I was introduced to Ms. Cheryl Jackson and some of her managers at AAR.
And you say in your affidavit that you shared a strategy with them about potentially collaborating to secure business with SAA Technical. Can you just tell us a bit about SAA Technical? What does it do?
South African Airways Technical, they provide technical services to SAA and other third parties, other airlines like Angolan Airline, it used to be the clients, Zimbabwean Airlines, and a whole lot of international airlines. So SAA Technical would provide what you call C checks and B checks. That is very technical. I think it's, I don't know.
Give us an idea what it is.
It's like when you take your car to service, whether it's a major service or a minor service. So SAA Technical would provides
that kind of service in
in
regard to an aeroplane.
Yes, and what was profound about SAA Technical is that at that time they had a lot of third-party clients. So with my strategy to enter this market using SAA Technical, it would be easier to get access to the airlines that they've already signed up to service their aeroplanes.
And what role did you see AAR playing in that partnership?
I'm not a technical person. SRS Aviation at that time did not have any experience on the technical services, and I expected AAR to come with technical expertise.
You mentioned Ms. Jackson as a person that you met. What was her position? I think you say it at paragraph 9 of your affidavit.
She was the Vice President, Government Affairs and Corporate Development.
Can we then go to paragraph 11, where you say AAR was not interested in an agency agreement?
Well, before she does that, I think earlier on you interrupted her before she could say what story she presented to Ms. Jackson.
I apologize.
Yes. So tell us what happened when you met Ms. Jackson. What did you say to her, and what was her response to your proposal or request or suggestion?
I introduced SRS Aviation as an air charter company in South Africa that is currently, or that wants to diversify, and one of the diversification areas is to provide technical services to the industry. And given the fact that we didn't have technical expertise and have never provided such a service, we wanted to partner with them as AAR Corporation. And we proposed various ways in which we could partner. And one of them is that they sign an agency agreement with SRS Aviation.
If they signed such an agency agreement, what would that have entailed in terms of the relationship or the partnership?
It would have given us
at a practical level.
It would have given us a solid, what do I call it? I could be able to go and market AAR confidently that they are my partner.
So would it have enabled SRS to go to SAA and any other aeroplane company and say, we are able to provide technical services, technical expertise for aeroplanes because we are in partnership with AAR. And then if there was work to be done, you would then arrange for AAR to send people who have the required expertise. Is that what would happen?
That was the intention.
Okay.
And so when you returned to South Africa, what was the arrangement that you had in place?
At the meeting, immediately, Ms. Jackson indicated that as AAR, they do not sign any agency agreements with foreign companies, but they would suggest that I go back and get to understand what the contract I was talking about at SAA Technical and give them the details. What does it entail? How big is the contract? And also introduce them to SAA Technical. So, but when I returned to South Africa, the communication was not flowing easy between AAR and SRS as I would have loved to have a solid relationship and communication channel. Then I had to go back
Well, before we go back, let's finish the meeting, the first meeting you have with Ms. Jackson. So you put your proposal, and your proposal was one of a partnership.
Yes.
And then when she didn't like that, you then suggested an agency. Is that correct?
Yes,
or
an
do I
agent.
misunderstand something? Is that
Yes,
how it went?
Yes, I proposed to become their agent in
Yes.
Africa, yes.
Yes. And in response to that, did she say we can look into that, but you must go back and give us more details?
She didn't say they would look at that, but she indicated that there is a policy that they have in the United States that governs the agency agreements with foreign companies, and so they don't sign agency agreement before the deal is on the table. So
Or did she say, we want to know more about the deal that
They-
we might get through you? And then if we like it, we might consider signing.
they wanted, yes, to know more about the contract at SAA Technical, and they wanted to be introduced.
Yeah,
Yes.
before they could consider signing anything.
They were very clear from the beginning that they would pay up to 8% of the value of the contract the day they get the contract. So there was they didn't promise me that in between they will sign an agency agreement. So
Yes.
it was a verbal agreement, and it was up to me to say then I stop, I don't do anything, or as an entrepreneur, I go and run around and get information and go back to them so that they can trust and believe what I'm saying.
Would it be correct to say that you parted with Ms. Jackson on the basis that her attitude was that in principle, there was a possibility that they could sign an agreement with you, but they needed more information and something more would need to be done before they could consider that? Would that be a fair summary of her attitude, or not really?
At the meeting, they did indicate that as a company, they also took a strategy to explore the African continent. So I came at the right time to talk to them. However, they were very clear that they would not sign an agency agreement with SRS Aviation, but only when the day we get that contract, they will pay up to 8% of the value of that contract to SRS as a commission for the work done, and also partner with us as their BEE partner, because then I had to explain that they need what you call black economic empowerment, and yes.
So is the position therefore that they said, one, we can't sign a partnership agreement with you.
Yes.
Two, we can't sign an agency agreement with you. But three, if you go back home and get more details and introduce us to SA Technical, and we sign an agreement with SAA Technical, one, we can pay you 8%, two, we can have you as a BEE partner. Would that be a fair summary of what they said?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for that. Chair, I see we've gone past 4:30. That this would be an appropriate time within the evidence to adjourn.
To adjourn. Okay, all right. We are going to adjourn then, and then tomorrow, should we start at 10? How long are we likely to be with her, and should we start early?
Chair, I anticipate we'll take most of the day with Ms. Sambo.
We don't need to start early.
I don't anticipate that we need to
Yeah.
start early. We don't have another witness scheduled for tomorrow. It's only Ms. Sambo.
okay,
And
okay.
I'm confident we'll finish
Yes.
her within the time.
Okay, no, that's fine. We'll adjourn Ms. Sambo and resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock, so you will come back tomorrow at 10. then adjourn.
All rise.